to Power to the Indie series, and thank you to our sponsor, Creative BC. Today we're going to talk about best practices, marketing and engagement in a connected world. So first of all, I'd like to welcome my esteemed panel, and I'll give you a little background on each and every person. So to my furthest left, we have Marc Hofstatter, who's head of film at Indiegogo. So most of us are no strangers to Indiegogo. It's an international crowdfunding site that's been offering anyone who has an idea to be able to raise the funds and amplify their goal. 9 million people from all over the world visit the site on a monthly basis. Is that number wrong? That's your Wikipedia page, so you gotta update that. Okay. 50? 15 million from all over the world visit the site on a monthly basis. So there's two kinds of campaigns that you can choose from. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. The first type of campaign is you can launch a campaign, you can keep the money that you've earned no matter what you've set your goal at, or you can choose to have a setting that if you don't reach your goal, then you return your funding to contributors. So I'm looking forward to just sort of discussing different types of campaigns. And I also read that the company would like to move towards potential equity investment in projects by contributors. So I'd really like to discuss that a bit further too. So Marc's brought a sizzle reel with him. So if we can play that clip, that'd be great. And please go ahead and set it up while there's a little pause while they get it running.
It's just a very simple walkthrough of some of the campaigns that the company's been around since January 2008. We launched at Sundance, started off solely in film. In the last 6 years, approximately 6 years, the company's evolved past film and to include nonprofit, gaming, music, anything and anything from that you can think of has been funded on the site. But obviously, we're concentrating on film today. We recently partnered up with the Canadian Film Centre with the exclusive crowdfunding platform for the CFC that was announced last month at Toronto. We have a number of amazing Canadian filmmakers that we've been working with and helping them fund their projects here at the festival. One example is Adam Brooks and his film The Editor. And another great sort of shout out to another great filmmaker is a filmmaker named Jeremy Lalonde. Jeremy just completed his second Indiegogo where he raised over $100,000 for his film, follow me here, How to Plan an Orgy in a Small Town. And very quickly, just about marketing, their original goal was $70,000 Canadian. They exceeded it by over 40, actually almost 50, I believe. And their stretch goal at $100,000 was they were going to film themselves, the director and the producers were going to streak through downtown Toronto if they reached $100,000. It's a bit of guerrilla marketing, if you will. Either fortunately or unfortunately for them, they hit the goal, and so they went through downtown Toronto streaking, and they threw it up on YouTube, blurring out the juicy parts, of course.
Right, of course. So note to self, put orgy in your title.
Put orgy in your title, get naked,
you're gonna strip naked.
and be funny.
Yeah.
Jeremy's first film, Sex After Kids, I'll say it's a theme here, was up for a number of Canadian Comedy Awards, and I believe won several of them as well. So that's
awesome. Okay, well,
I think we can basically end the panel on put sex in the title and get naked. We're done, right?
We're done.
Marketing 101. Marketing 101.
Let's run the Indiegogo sizzle reel. And I was warned there will be an uncomfortable pause while we get this going. So if anyone has a joke.
I don't want to hold up the panel if it's not working.
No, it's
so
okay. I think they're getting it going. I think. There we go.
This is the loudest chair I've ever been in. Okay, I have an idea for social media, speaking of Marketing 101. Will you guys kindly wave at the camera while it's getting queued up so that I can show everybody how well this is attended around the world? Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm on Twitter right now.
Yeah, I'm going to, excuse me one moment.
Maybe we can keep it.
So this is my strategy the entire time to
we
cause
can
awkward
do-
silence.
No, that's okay. I don't know. We'll get to that sizzle reel. It'll come, here we go. There it is. Press play.
Cheers. will have nothing to do with the raising of money for my documentary.
Great. Thank you. So next Marc is Marc Schiller, who's the CEO and founder of Bond Strategy and Influence. And Marc brings a wealth of entrepreneurial knowledge in brand strategy, marketing, and public relations. For 15 years, Bond has rewritten the book on how entertainment companies and brands should approach marketing in the digital age. He leads a company to blend the smarts of a strategic consulting firm with the influence of a creative marketing agency to transform businesses. His recent analysis of internet trends in the marketplace for indie films offers insight into balancing a strategy between exposure on popular online marketplaces with the power of discovery. During this era of oversupply, the stronger the niche and the more available it is, the better it can move with better margins. And I read something interesting on your site that you had cited how up to 40% of an audience following an independent film on Facebook is living in a country where the film will never be released. So I'd love to bring that into this discussion a bit later on. So there's lots to talk about there.
I should say until now.
Until now, yeah. And I don't know if there's anything you want to add about Bond, or did I
No,
cover it?
I love being here and love being in Canada and Vancouver, and I look forward to participating in the dialogue.
Great. And next to Marc is Joly, who, if you're from Vancouver, I'm sure you're familiar with Jay. The CineCoup Film Accelerator is his company that he began, and the Film Accelerator is a way for indie filmmakers to develop, market, and finance their feature films. Filmmaking teams apply to CineCoup with a 2-minute trailer, then advance through a social platform that helps build a fan base. Top 10 projects are optioned for development, and a jury of industry professionals and a CineCoup superfan will select one project for up to $1 million Canadian in production financing with a guaranteed release in Cineplex theaters. So they did their first one last year, and they selected a film called Wolf Cop, which has been released in theaters. And this year, the next campaign for the Film Accelerator will soon be announced, probably this coming winter. But in the meantime, they've just announced and launched a really new, exciting accelerator called, and they collaborating with Just for Laughs Television, and they've joined forces to create a similar model for a half-hour comedy special. And then the selected team will receive $500,000 in production financing to air during CBC Television's 2015 primetime schedule.
Amazing.
So really interesting model on financing independent content. And we've got Emily Best next to Jay from Seed&Spark. Welcome. So Seed&Spark is an independent film community where filmmakers and audiences join forces to fund, promote, and watch new indie films. Their crowdfunding tool, called the Wish List, which I'm excited to hear more about, allows supporters to buy or loan specific items to a production. She leads the Stay Indie Tour, teaching crowdfunding to build Independence Workshop in 30 cities in 60 days. Holy moly.
This is city number 5.
Making you an expert on helping filmmakers use online tools for successful crowdfunding and successful distribution. So filmmakers can stream their films on Seed&Spark, and future plans are to distribute to other platforms as well. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, so we're crowdfunding with distribution built in. So if you've crowdfunded successfully, you guarantee yourselves some minimum distribution, which is about to not be so minimum, which is kind of exciting.
Great.
And the platform, since we launched the crowdfunding to build independence classes, boasts an 84% campaign success rate.
That's great.
Across campaigns, which is pretty exciting. And I'm teaching the class on Saturday. So if you do want to come back and get that, it's like an action plan to understand crowdfunding as the crowd part is the more important part. But really to use crowdfunding to pull your distribution.
Right. Great. Well, welcome. And next to me is Sara
Kiener.
Kiener. Sorry, I almost said Kiener even though I asked you.
Okay.
So Film Presence is Sara's company. It's a boutique marketing and outreach company co-founded by her and based in New York City. Film Presence combines event-based theatrical screenings with strong outreach partnerships to boost box office sales and maximize word of mouth, leading up to a theatrical engagement. Outreach projects previously previously managed include Frederick Wiseman's La Danse, Tamara Davis's Jean-Michel Basquiat, The Radiant Child, Lucy Walker's Wasteland, and The Waiting Room by Pete Nick. So all great films that have obviously had a huge outreach. So really excited to welcome you all. So I wanted to start, this word crowdfunding has already come up among the discussion. I don't think we don't want to isolate this panel to crowdfunding because I don't think it's the be-all, end-all, but I do, I'm sure this audience is interested in that subject matter. And if I could get just a show of hands, how many people in this audience have run their own crowdfunding campaign? Wow, interesting.
How many have run more than one?
Okay.
Wow, good job.
Yeah,
Way to go.
congratulations. Now,
Way to stick it out.
Of those who ran the crowdfunding campaign, how many succeeded in raising the amount of money that they asked for? Not bad. Not bad. Is it a trick question? Well, because one of the things I pulled from, and this is from the Kickstarter site, and mind you, this is not just isolated to the film campaigns, but of the 179,555 total campaigns run, only 70,711 have succeeded in meeting their funding goals, so which accounts for less than 40% of all campaigns. So I was curious, Marc, I wanted to point this question to you. Do you have a statistic on the film side of what percentage of film crowdfunding campaigns have you seen be successful? Although, given that Indiegogo actually allows a filmmaker to collect the funds.
So we actually gauge success in a different manner than other crowdfunding platforms. So in that sizzle reel, there were 2 documentaries in there: the Elaine Stritch documentary, "Shoot Me," and "Don't Stop Believin'," the Journey documentary. Both ran Indiegogos, and actually neither one of them reached their goal. The films got made, but they were able to take home the money because they did what's called flexible funding on Indiegogo, which means if you choose that, you get to take home what you raise, as opposed to fixed funding, which is an all-or-nothing proposition. You get it or you don't. And some people may think that, well, either I'm going to get the $50,000 or I'm not. If I don't do it, then I can't make my movie, or if I raise less than that, then I can't make my movie. But as we've seen time and time again, there are hundreds of films on Indiegogo that choose flexible funding, raise some money, and are able to take that money and parlay that into something else.
But I just want to be really sure that we can talk sort of philosophy of crowdfunding, but in the real practical piece of it, crowdfunding is a privilege that is bestowed upon us by our audiences. And so if we do not respect what we are promising for their contribution, that privilege will go away. So when you do think about flexible funding, if you are going to take the risk of doing flexible funding, make sure you can still do what you promised, no matter how much money you raise, if you only raise a portion of it. Otherwise, the people who contributed with the promise of, so if you're going to raise $20,000 and you only raise $2,000, you better have, that $2,000 came from people who were expecting you to do what you promised for $20,000. So either you have to communicate with them, here's what happens if we reach 2, 4, 10, 20, and be very, very clear about that. Or you have to be prepared to succeed in any case. But what you can't do is take the money and not do what you promised.
Well, yeah, I think that goes without saying, for even if you do hit your goal.
Yeah. I don't think it goes without saying, unfortunately.
No, I'm saying I do think it goes without saying, because if you're trying to raise $50,000 and you raise $50,000, it doesn't mean that you can still make your film. I think what we're looking at is like a perfect example. So Justin Simeon, first-time feature filmmaker, directed a film called Dear White People. His goal was $25,000 on Indiegogo. He raised $43,000, if I recall correctly. $43,000 was not going to make a feature film. What we're looking at with crowdfunding, by and large.
But that's not what he promised. He said he was going to raise the money to make a teaser to raise money to make the feature.
Would it be all right if I speak for a little bit?
Yeah, but I just want to, because I think there's a lot of information that goes out there, and I just want to be sure that we're being really clear about, what was offered and what was made. I think
the goal here is that crowdfunding is a very public forum. You're online, it's social media, you're in front of everybody, in front of the world. If you take the money and run, or you don't deliver in what you're doing, then your reputation is on the line. And as we know with crowdfunding, the first third, roughly and historically, is coming from your friends, your family, and your inner circle. So if you want to go home to mom and say, hey, I took your $2,000 and spent it on beer and cigarettes, that's up to you. But your mom may not buy you a birthday present or leave you in her will when she dies.
Right.
So.
Or ever contribute to crowdfunding again. I think what's really cool about crowdfunding is it has finally given us a sense of the community that we live in, right? So how many of you have contributed to a crowdfunding campaign? Pretty much everyone in the room, right? And I know that when somebody is crowdfunding, one of the first things I look for in their profile on any platform is, have they contributed to other campaigns? Are they engaged in the community of support that they're asking for? And I think what's so special about crowdfunding is we've finally let our audiences into this really special thing that we get to do. We let them participate in all sorts of really exciting ways. And we also have to acknowledge that if we don't really respect this exchange, it will go away. So it isn't just that, you know, your mom will leave you out of your will, but she probably won't contribute to another crowdfunding campaign. So as you are engaged in crowdfunding, you are also an ambassador for crowdfunding for film to the world. And that's what I think is really both exciting and special, and it's also a big responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of it. And I see another kind of dimension, and what interests me as a distributor and as a marketer is that, you know, the business side of the industry has very specific formulas that are what gets through the filter. You know, star-driven, very specific things are what gets into theaters and what gets made and what gets onto the platforms that, you know, a lot of us buy from iTunes or what have you. What I love about crowdfunding is that it opens up the opportunity for a filmmaker who's got a crazy idea, who's got a story that is so bizarre and unique and doesn't fit any formula, to go out there and say, I really want to make this movie, and does anybody else agree with me? And then you can participate in realizing creativity that would never have happened if there wasn't crowdfunding. So that's what excites me, is that we're allowing films to actually find their you know, they're getting made that would never have gotten made any other way. And that's, you know, that's opening up doors to an incredible amount of really fascinating, great films that are there because somebody said, man, I want that movie to get made, and I'm going to make sure it happens. Those are the best campaigns.
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask, because we talked a little bit before the panel, is, you know, going on Indiegogo's site, where you guys actually list the couple of top funded films. And that's, you know, not to just put all the other films in a category that didn't raise this amount of money, but $2.48 million in funding was raised for a movie called Laser Team. But I noticed that the team behind it, they had a huge web exposure already.
Yeah,
They've got a sci-fi comedy.
They were filmmakers called Rooster Teeth. They're out of Austin, Texas.
Yeah, they have their own conference. They got to announce it to 30,000 people.
They've been building a fan base for the last 10 years. Raising funds for digital content. Yeah, which is great. Yeah. So they very successfully used the Indiegogo platform. You know, the one under that, after that was a film called Gosnell, which had obviously a very controversial subject matter. It's about an abortionist doctor portrayed as a serial killer. They've raised $2.2 million. And, you know, with CineCoup, Jay, you know, you put a wide call out to all types of filmmakers and all types of films. And really used your social media funnel to arrive at a film that was unmistakably very genre. So my question is do you have to fit into a niche, and do you have to fit into a genre? Because I love this idea of films that are so wacky and wild, and nobody would make them in a million years in the studio or the you know, the industry model that we rely on in terms of the business end of things. But are they actually getting funded with crowdfunding, and are they finding success there?
Let's be a little careful. So I feel like there's a trend in our industry to kind of want to isolate the stories of the huge successes and make those models. And if you dig down into them, I mean, as Marc just said, what Rooster Teeth has been doing is building a fan base for years that they were then able to capitalize on. Sure. There's no filmmaker that doesn't have, you know, and frankly, there are plenty of stars who've tried to use crowdfunding
Right.
unsuccessfully. Star power isn't it anymore. It is a really interpersonal relationship with your audience. And the fact is, if you don't have much of an online presence and you haven't been building a direct relationship with your audience over time, you're not going to raise a ton of money through crowdfunding on your first go. The nice thing is you can use crowdfunding to level up each time. So we have a filmmaker who was an NYU graduate student, wanted to raise money for a short, and he knew his online presence just wasn't there. So we have the capacity to do staged financing for a film inside the same page. So you just sort of aggregate audience over time. And he did a 30-day campaign to raise $6,000 for development. He raised, 110% of that, and went on and did everything he promised for that campaign. 5 months later, when people ask how often can you dip into the kitty, I like to talk about him. 5 months later, he came back and raised $35,000 from a network he had grown through his first campaign, and then came back a year later after production, halfway through editing, to raise another $6,000 for post, and he overfunded that one because at that point everybody was desperate to see this movie made.
Right.
But he raised, how much did I just add up? $57,000 for a short graduate thesis film. And that's because he was using crowdfunding to build audience over time, which will serve him for his entire career, as opposed to just using crowdfunding, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And Sara, if you wanted to
Yeah,
talk
so
about
I've done a range of projects, 6 on overall, some on Indiegogo, some on Kickstarter, some had celebrities at the core, and some were just like that crazy idea that could. So I think my ethos is where there's a will, there's a way to raise those funds. I mean, you have to be realistic about where you set that goal. I mean, obviously not every film is going to make $1 million or even $100,000 or even $50,000 for that matter. So it is about thinking about what's realistic and thinking about your audience and thinking about what fan base you already have, thinking about what partners you can connect with who already have built-in fan bases. So those are some of the things that we think about when we're setting goals with
I would
collaborators.
agree with what Sara's saying, in that, one of the things you got to look at also is when you're walking into a campaign, and again, I know we don't want to make it all about crowdfunding.
It's okay. We're talking about it.
But this is actually marketing as well, where and by the way, one of the things we sort of say at Indiegogo is that the funding element is number 3 or 4 on the list.
Yeah.
If you're putting that first, if you're just looking for money, you're doing it wrong. It's like at that point, we say that crowdfunding and Indiegogo is not panhandling, but if you're looking for money first and foremost, that is panhandling.
And I think that's such an important distinction
Yeah,
too.
very true. So, but with any film, with any project, ideally it doesn't have just one core audience, doesn't have just one fan base. If it's just black males in their teens, that's a very small demographic. If you're going to say, oh, it's also skaters, or it's also fans of juggling, it's like these are different pockets of your audience that you can market your project to, and the idea is that if for whatever reason one of them is not responding, you're not banking your entire success on that one core piece of the audience. You've got these other 3 or 4 pockets to really play to. There's a short film that's funding right now in Indiegogo called Prince Ali, and the director Kevin, he's Iranian, and it's a Iranian love story. Now it feels a little bit more niche, but surprisingly, the film is being produced by an individual named Mac Bornstein. Max wrote Godzilla, and he's now writing an adaptation of Minority Report for TV. And so Max has his own fan base that he's bringing to the project. Kevin, who's directing this short, again, romantic drama, Iranian love drama. His first film was a film called ZMD, Zombies of Mass Destruction. So he's bringing his own fan base to the table. They're diversifying and trying to bring as many pieces to the pie as possible.
I think that's great. And when you say panhandling too, I have to admit that when crowdfunding first started happening, I was a little bit hesitant to sort of buy into this idea that it's all based, I kept thinking it's just based on the altruistic nature of people. And the more times you keep asking people to donate, like how many times in our inbox now do we get like, I'm running a crowdfunding campaign, please donate.
I think that things,
But I
the
think it's-
tides have shifted away from that. I
Yeah.
think that people are sick of asking their friends and family for money, and now people are actually thinking of marketing and going outside of their network and outside of their base. And talking about best practices, I just want to riff off of what you were saying about all these core audiences. I think that's essential, and I think that that's as much an integral part of the preparation part as building your page and the video itself, is thinking about the audience, the audiences, and how you're going to speak and connect with all of them. So if you have a film about, I'm just like riffing, like juggling and surfboarding is both in your films, your message to the jugglers and what you take to them is going to be very different from your message to the surfboarders. And we spend weeks, if not months, fine-tuning our message to each demographic.
So one of the things that I'll be teaching in the class on Saturday is the process to learn message testing. So one of the things that because I think when you talk about like, let's make a movie, let's get funding, let's get distribution, oh God, that's so much stuff to do. And we already have to know how to, shoot and edit and color correct and act and write and, produce and direct. And those are all hard anyway. And now we actually do, as film entrepreneurs, have to add to it, marketing, understanding our audiences, a little bit of what, the Marcs know, and we have to do all these things. One of the things that we really teach is a place to start, and one of the things that we say is if you can pick 5 real humans, it's actually, I discourage you from talking in demographics at the beginning. You'll learn about your demographics later, but think of 5 real humans in the world who you know and can talk to who aren't your parents, because they're going to contribute for their reasons.
Some do, some don't.
Just to get you outside the house.
Exactly. But think of 5 real humans in the world who would be interested in your film, and go and interview them and ask them, where do they hang out online? What makes them click on things? What blogs do they read? What music do they listen to? What organizations do they belong to? Add to this. You basically, you put together sort of an interview size. I mean, this is best practices 101 for us. This is where you start, is you interview these 5 people and you start to learn about where your audience or audiences hang out online. And it may not be the same for the jugglers as the surfers. Yeah. I bet the surfers are on Instagram and the jugglers are hanging out on Reddit. That's my guess. What blogs they read, or what they read, where they get their news. If you have a bunch of New York Times readers, they're going to respond to really different messaging than BuzzFeeders, right? The BuzzFeeders, you better make them feel like something will die if they don't click right now. And for New York Times folks, they want something that's a little more erudite, right? And message testing is really about learning as much specific information about the real humans, like living, breathing people, like all the people that are staring at us right now, who are going to spend their hard-earned money to be a part of your film. And I don't say help you make your film, because I think we have to get rid of words like donate and help. It's not a donation, except if you're working with a 501c3, it's a contribution. And they're not helping you, they're participating. They're joining you. These are some things that message testing starts to reveal really work well, as opposed to, help me make my movie, and if I don't get all the money, I'll get none of the money. Click here now, please. And I can't tell you how many of those.
A lot of
The only thing I'll add to that, because that was pretty comprehensive, is the prizes that you're offering. Because I think consumers want different things, right? So one consumer wants to see it as soon as possible digitally, and another user wants to have a conversation with the director. Right. And so it's just scaling all of those, thinking about your audience. And the prizes that you may think are your coolest, like maybe the least
dinner with
selling,
me.
right? Yeah. It's just like, I am shocked sometimes at what sells and what doesn't. So it's thinking about the audience very much. So like, I did Miles Ahead, Don Cheadle's campaign on Indiegogo, and we weren't rallying the Cincinnati base enough. That was where it was being shot. So mid-campaign, I called up a theater in Cincinnati and I said, look, can we set up a screening there at some point in the future? Don Cheadle will be there. And they're like, yeah, duh. And I sold 100 tickets for $100 on the campaign. That was because we weren't connecting with Cincinnati enough. Right. And we problem solved mid-campaign.
Right.
Oh, and so experimentation and not sticking to a failing plan. Those are 2, you don't have to come to the class anymore. Those are 2, I think, of the most important things. You can't be afraid to try things and fail. Don't be ready to kill your darlings. So you might have the coolest crowdfunding campaign or the coolest crowdfunding reward ever, and nobody wants it, and just get over it. Like seriously, just get over it. And then make sure that you're ready to make adjustments midway through. Which means you'll need time
Daily.
and friends. Don't do it alone.
I think you need Sara. That sounds like. Well, if I can just say with Jay, like you approach things in a much different way because it wasn't so much crowdfunding. You weren't asking people to donate, but if you can speak a little bit about the Film Accelerator and how you really asked your filmmakers to show a specific engagement over social media.
Yeah, well, just to answer your first question was we did use crowdfunding, but it was one of 10 things in the ecosystem of marketing we did, and it was the last thing we did. The movie was already locked; it was already financed, and what we did was use it to build a different kind of audience that hadn't been exposed to, say, everything that we did was on the social web. All of the earned media, print, radio, and television we did. We used it to basically get enough money to do a mold for an action figure. It was very humble. It was very easy. And my big thing is, like anything that you do, one of the key things is this is a full-time job when you go around asking for money. Like you can't half-step an Indiegogo campaign. And also manage expectation is a key to this. So we just wanted to raise $10,000. We tripled that. And what we did was use it to build other entry points into the IP. So, and our rewards were all based around like vinyl records and graphic novels and stuff like that. So
Well, it sounds like you really knew the brand so well in order to really tailor what
It's
people were going to get.
cool brand.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is once you understand, because the whole thing about CineCoup, the whole innovation was, we wanted to identify talent where no one was looking. We wanted to de-risk new, original, crazy stories, niche, but it could be a high concept genre. It could be a documentary about an orangutan. We're pretty wide what it could be. But the big thing was building an audience before we start financing. And to really understand it and to understand the kinds of fans. It's not a homogeneous mass. Like they're lurkers, they're fans, they're super fans, and then they're whales in the casino. And those are really the ones you're after, because they'll do a fair amount of your heavy lifting for you. And those are the people you pay special reward and special attention to. And in our Indiegogo campaign, we actually used it to sell tickets for the movie theater in Canada because we knew exactly when the movie was coming out. And the cool thing is so when you actually look at the reward, it was $5 more than the face of a movie ticket because they were, again, looking at the public like a benefactor to really get behind us and creating the stuff within that ecosystem we knew we had because we knew who our audience was that they would respond to. Like they're into buying a $50 glissé movie poster. They do want to spend that extra $20 so they don't just get the gun with the action figure, but they get the 2 bottles of liquor and the box of donuts.
That's a good deal.
That kind of stuff.
I
just thought of an interesting analogy because you talk about how the price of ticket was $5 more than it normally would be in the theater, but people still did it anyway because they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And so it makes me think about when you see a kid on a street corner selling a cup of lemonade for $1, and you think about what's in there. It's just a lemonade packet, a mixture packet of lemonade and some water, and costs him maybe 3 cents. But you do it anyway because you feel good about it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a proper
I think
analogy.
that touches on another best practice that's often overlooked, which is the story that you're telling with your campaign. And you're touching on this, you both are. But it just has to be compelling and resonate. You can't just be up there and say, I need money. But it's also interesting just to think about what you say you need the money for, and sometimes that's unaddressed. It's also how you present it, like if you're just sitting in a room, or if you've really put thought into it and that's clear, and your video speaks to the audience and is authentic to what your movie is. Yeah. All those things resonate. And it's unfortunately one of the things that I see not a lot of creativity, and especially in the film crowdfunding world. I think that the people in the tech world and the gaming world make more creative videos than we do, and it's a little embarrassing because we're filmmakers.
Hey guys, if you're gonna use a video to ask people to fund this really cool movie you're claiming you can make, that video can't suck.
Yeah.
Like, it's really basic. If you're gonna tell people, I'm a really good filmmaker, enough that you should give me some of your money, make the 90 seconds prove that. Like, that's really important. And I've seen people do that, even sitting in their, I've seen really incredibly clever ones done with the built-in camera on an old Mac. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're storytellers. This part is the part that's native to us. And I feel like the pressure of this new thing makes us forget that, like, we can just do this thing the way that we already know how.
So everything that's being said, I completely agree with. I think the best practices are great. I think the tips are great. But I also feel that it's really important to make a statement that says, if you're going about anything, and crowdfunding is one, but if going back to becoming a marketer, and there's so much pressure on filmmakers now to, you got to be good in social media, you got to be good at crowdfunding, you got to be good at all this stuff. And at the end of the day, you just want to make a movie, but you got to do all of these things, and it's overwhelming. And so what happens is you have all of these people telling you, and again, I'm not making the comparison here, but you got all these people telling you, do this, do this, do this, watch this, watch this.
Yeah.
The most important thing to do is participate. First of all, participate in other people's crowdfunding campaigns, get the emails, get the rewards, because you're a fan, not because you want to do it. And then find your own voice. Find your own way to do it, because we were doing so much social media for years, and I would come to these panels and everybody would say, well, what do I do? And they're expecting that there's this book that they could pick up that says, do this, this, and this, and you'll be as good as Kevin Smith, or you'll be as good as this guy.
Right.
You
There's
are
no
not going to
formula.
be as good as anybody if you don't find what works. And that means testing and learning, doing things that, have a bottle of wine and say, I'm going to do something stupid, and it'll turn out to be the most important thing you do.
It'll start a career like Mamrie Hart's.
Yeah, exactly. So be careful that you don't try to copy somebody else's best practices. You got to create your own way of doing it. Just like you have to make your own movie. You can't just copy somebody else's movie.
Can I say also, it's not our fault. Like, for years, literally until just a few years ago, the best practices were to pick up a book that was called How to Break into Hollywood. And there would, people making millions of dollars for years on, how to get that studio meeting. And we're told somehow that, like, if we do all the right things, the machine will choose us. And what we know beyond a shadow of a doubt is the machine doesn't choose all but literally 0.01% of the people. And we can either be content being the 99% and continuing to not make money at our work, or we can just finally succumb to the fact that we are business people. Like, this is show business, and as filmmakers, as independent filmmakers, we are entrepreneurs. And I've never heard an entrepreneur being like, I'm just not good at the business stuff. Because entrepreneurs also have to be creative people. And they're not selling themselves short on one side for the other. I think there's a fundamental kind of learning shift that is starting to take place, and it's partially because we're starting to feel okay with experimenting. But the film business is still a very scary place to fail publicly. Whereas in Silicon Valley, failure is fetishized. So one of the things, and this is why the community support is so important, we have to be willing to let our friends fail publicly and spectacularly and tell them that we really appreciate that they did that. And be really bold about that and support each other in that way. That there can't be any more schadenfreude around, I'm sort of secretly glad that movie that was kind of like mine didn't succeed.
Right. Well, let me ask Marc from Indiegogo, do you see a change? Because what you guys have just described is, in a way, the crowdfunding tools out there are very prescribed in terms of how we present ourselves, with the video, with the giveaways, with asking a certain amount. Are you seeing a shift? I mean, obviously, Jay has proven that there is a different way. There are different models to approach. And I did think it was interesting that there was talk of equity investment from the people who are contributing in the film. So in a way, it's cutting out potentially the distributors, potentially the broadcasters. Is it moving in that way? Are you seeing a bit of weariness in terms of,
people, the weirdness in terms of people contributing without wanting more from it?
Yeah, and just
Yeah.
that it's
I mean, actually,
becoming so common practice now that we
it's
need
funny.
to.
You know, people have thought that there's going to be people are just going to get exhausted by it, because you said earlier that people are getting a lot of emails in their inbox, or they're on the Facebook feed saying, hey, this crowdfunding campaign, that crowdfunding campaign. But in reality, what we're seeing is that it's pushing people to be more creative, more unique, more special. And so there may be more campaigns today, and we are seeing more campaigns on Indiegogo than we've ever seen before. But the ones that are succeeding are the ones that are taking the time to be different and unique and break through and say, I'm not just going to have a T-shirt and a DVD to offer up. I'm going to offer up this really cool experience. Or going back to Wolf Cop, offer up something that's different, where it's not necessarily to fund the film, but it's to perhaps market or engage the audience. In terms of equity, in people, in Canada, obviously the laws are different. In the United States, right now, equity crowdfunding on a mass level, in terms of the average contributor, is still not yet legal. It's been passed into law by the U.S. Congress, but it's not been enacted yet. That's been sitting for
A while.
18 months?
April 2012
Right.
was when the law was first passed. The Jobs Act was passed, and
Right.
it was supposed to be finished and enacted by the end of the year. So here we are, 2.5 years later. And there's a
Do you
lot.
think that will create a big shift, though?
When that happens, I think that there will be. I think it'll be played in some degrees like the stock market. But at the same time, though, we have to think about, there's going to be a lot of education that's going to need to happen, because the reality is that independent films, they're hard to make money on, and there's very few that do. And there'll be people who are making short films and web series and saying, who are asking for equity crowdfunding, and no, that's not going to happen.
I think we're forgetting one. You mentioned when you said something about my introduction, the word discovery, and I think we're forgetting the fact that that people do go to the sites and look for cool movies and look for cool products. I do. I mean, I'm not into video games, but I love the movie about the glove, and I love this movie, and I gave him 20
And
bucks
you
or
gave the
30
guy
bucks.
who was trying to make a
Sure,
salad.
sure. And
No,
I
I
think
just
a
laughed
lot
at
of
that.
people, are creative, want to connect with creativity, and your point about the structure of tools is really valuable. The tools that Seed&Spark or Indiegogo or Kickstarter give, that's not limiting. That's actually really empowering. It's what you do with the tools, and that's unlimited what you can do. I think you just have to have the freedom to say, I'm not going to just shortcut and copy something that somebody has done. In terms of the Jobs Act and crowdfunding, that's going to be a disaster if that happens.
Yep.
I am as against as you could ever be turning crowdfunding into, I want equity
Right.
in this. There's going to be lawsuits and stupid stuff happening. I hope it never happens, and I hope filmmakers never proceed that road. It would be a disaster.
And it's just quick, this is a big deal in the States because it represents new legislation. Unfortunately, something that hasn't been talked about enough but has just been sort of surfaced is there's something called the bad actors clause in any Securities and Exchange Commission regulations. And the bad actors clause basically says if you're ever going to make a public offering, so an IPO, for example, if you're going to sell securities on the public market, you have to go through a comprehensive review of every board member, every participant, everybody who stands to participate on the back end in any kind, and they can have zero criminal record. And then there's all sorts of vagaries about contracts that they signed that were in dispute and all sorts of these things. You have to hire private investigators to dig into records, far-reaching. Not to be unfair here, but there are a lot of filmmaking teams for whom this would be difficult. Like there are bankruptcies.
And just to clarify Indiegogo's position in equity crowdfunding, it's something that we like. It's something that we actually.
Why do you like it?
Well, because there are individuals who are going to want to invest in films, and if they want to have that option, we feel that they should have that option. But let me guys, just finish up for a second. So but in terms of how they are enacted, we're not going to enter into it if it's going to be a crutch, or not be a crutch, but a kneecapping for our filmmakers or contributors.
Yeah, and
So-
so the reason that it's hotly, because again, we're all looking for that next model that's going to like solve this problem of why don't we make any money, and if we could only, and really the problem that we're always trying to solve because it feels the scariest is how do we keep funding our films, and equity crowdfunding seems like another potential solution to funding our films when in fact the way that it's legislated right now, and I think this is what both Marcs are talking about, is that the way that it is legislated, number one, makes it very, very difficult for people to participate in it. It's expensive and costly, and chances are they're not going to be able to pass the regulations. And the second is the film business at large does not make much money now. Sorry, guys. This is what we are trying to fix. And why on earth would we sell securities to people when we know that literally 9 times out of 10, that shit is not going to make money? Why would we do that?
Well, I guess I'm inquiring about it because at a certain level, I do understand the crowdfunding and a certain level of filmmaking and independent filmmaking and short filmmaking. But I guess I'm just interested. I mean, equity investment has been happening in film for years and years,
and we have
it's
been
part
burning,
of our
and we've been
industry.
burning through investors at a rate that is almost hard to keep up with. And thank God for the tech boom, we churned out a whole bunch more equally naive angel investors who we will burn through little by little as we go.
But I'll give you one example, going back to Dear White People. So Dear White People, again, raised $43,000 in Indiegogo. It had an outside investor come in, one investor, if I recall, and she bankrolled the entire film.
Because maybe she saw that.
She saw ability there, and now that film is going to
Did
come out.
that money go through Indiegogo or was
No,
it
no,
never?
it was outside. It was outside.
We sell credits is the way that we finance movies. We sell executive producer credits. Why do you think there are 20 producer credits on a movie? It's because that's how an independent film should raise their money, end of story, and that's how it should be done. There's a lot of people that have a lot of ego. They all want their name on a good film. They all want their name on something, and that's where the money comes from.
And what I would like us to all be engaged in collectively is an agreement that we are going to try to make more independent films be financially successful and pay those people back. Because while we do sell credits, I have spoken to many, many investors, and I'm sure we all have, who say, no, I invested in this film, they promised me X, Y, and Z, they had all these business models that made me think one thing, it went totally another way, and I'll never invest in film again.
But the same thing can also be, and by the way, I don't disagree with you. I think it's also, we can also look at the stock market. Obviously, if you're investing in Coca-Cola, it's one thing, but I have investments in stocks, and I've lost money in companies.
Right.
And so it's obviously, it's not exactly the same thing. It's apples and oranges, but they are both two fruits.
But
Well, to bring this, because I don't want to get too off topic here, to bring this back in terms of independent filmmakers marketing their films. So essentially what I'm hearing from you is we should never try to be marketing a film by saying, if you become an investor in this film, then there is an opportunity potentially to share in the profit of this film.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all.
Okay.
I'm saying you have to be thinking about how many people are going to actually watch and buy this film. And from the very beginning of your process, you should be thinking about how am I going to reach the maximum number of people who will pay for this movie. And if the answer after much research is 100,000 people will pay to see this movie at $5 a piece, $500,000 is the maximum return I can expect from this movie, I probably shouldn't make it for more than $250,000.
So that's a very cheap movie ticket.
No, I'm saying because most films are being bought online for roughly $5 a piece right now. So, and by the way, most theatrical is a loss leader. So what I'm saying is, if you really look at what is the size of your audience, where do they consume what they consume, you can build business models where you could turn to an investor and say, I am confident, in fact, that we can make money on this movie if we execute on this plan. And the way that you do that is building in the marketing from the very beginning. I want us to stop burning through investors. I want us to be able to say, this is a business plan I am confident we can execute on, because I want those people to come back and fund your next movie.
Right.
That's the goal of all of this.
I mean, and just I 100% agree in that your goal should be able to make. I think you should be able to make the best film you can and achieve the widest audience possible. And obviously, that's not easy to achieve. You're trying to, going back to juggling, you're trying to juggle and ride a unicycle at the same time. It's not easy.
But what if you want to make a movie that is just a cool idea? You know, why does everybody need to make a movie that is a blockbuster hit in theaters?
don't.
Why
You
can't
don't.
Yeah, but I mean, I want to make sure that crowdfunding doesn't have to be how do I fund $1 million movie? How do I fund a movie that's going to get sold to any of the traditional sources? Why can't crowdfunding be, you know what, I have an idea and I just want to fucking do it.
Well,
I just
I think
want
a
to
lot of
make
crowdfunding
my
is.
movie. And that's what I get excited by. And I don't care if it's 20 minutes or if it's 200 minutes. It's whatever the person makes, as long as, to the point that was made earlier, they make it. If it's 3 minutes, I don't care, because that's the direction that we're going. What Emily is saying is absolutely the future of sustainability in the business, because the funnels are getting smaller. They're not getting wider. And there's more content that's being put through the funnel, allowing less to have an opportunity to find its audience in the traditional models. And it's not just theatrical. It's all of those models. So
Well,
To
and
that
to
point-
speak to theatrical, I wanted to ask you
Yeah,
about
I want
your
to talk
model.
about that too. I mean, we traditionally did just theatrical marketing and outreach, and only in the last 2.5 years started doing marketing and outreach for crowdfunding campaigns. One of the things I'm most excited about exploring, and have already a little bit, is this idea of merging windows and collapsing models. I really, really, really want to crowdfund a film as it's preparing for Sundance or South by, the month leading up to that premiere, and I want to be selling tickets to theatrical screenings of that film the week after it premieres at Sundance. So we are doing your festival marketing, your crowdfunding marketing, and your theatrical marketing, and possibly even your digital marketing all at once. That is what needs to happen, and filmmakers just need to forego
I
the
know
sales.
Dylan is going to speak after. I mean, I thought that's what Sound City was. I mean, Sound City, I don't know if
There
there was
was some of
crowdfunding,
that.
forget
There was some of
crowdfunding,
that.
but there was that model, and that's what Upstream Color was. I mean, but it's really rare at Sundance.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I
okay,
was
I'm
going to
gonna
say,
speak to that for a
isn't there?
sec.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
That's what our whole platform does. That's what it was designed to do. You know, I talked about the first 3 things we do, but really it's about reducing discovery costs, finding an audience at the lowest possible dollar. And the last thing we do, our platform does, is it's a lot of analytics. And the analytics are used for one thing, to moneyball P&A spend when we go to theater. And that's really, there's a big, when you see the flattening of how theatrical's working, there's still a lot of money being spent on P&A and traditional. And our big thing was, how can we use dollars more efficiently? And when we saw how a lot of independents spend P&A money, they use a lot of the same techniques and a lot of the same spend as big tentpole movies do. And we can't do that. You can't go dollar for dollar against Guardians of the Galaxy. So what we really look at, like when we went to Cineplex, we looked at it from a capacity issue. We didn't look at it like we're going to put it in 50 theaters. We said we're going to put it in the right 6 theaters. So we could look at, and the goal was to go from $2,000 a screen to $6,000 a screen without ever spending a dime on what the big guys would do. And for us, that's where you can really start to make money and move the needle.
And the specificity of the marketing that we talked about putting into the very beginning of your crowdfunding campaign, I think this is really part of Sarah's point here, is that you're basically gaming the marketing system, right? There's no way, most of us have our elbow grease to spend on marketing. And therefore, if you have spent the time to really identify who your audience is and cultivate a direct connection to them, and that means you can get into their inbox, not just a like on Facebook, but you've gotten them to sign up for an email list where you can reach them in their inbox, you have a really good chance of being able to do a lot with very, very little. So, you know, the big studios are trying to do a version of this with, you know, $150 million, which is absurd when you think about it. And the mini majors are doing it for 2x whatever the budget is, usually, of a film, between $2 and $10 million. And then the rest of us are doing it with chutzpah and like a lot of planning, I think. And the reason that crowdfunding is so exciting as an opportunity is it gets us engaged in this distribution marketing before we've made the film. And that gives us the longest runway of time to build the audience sufficient to being able to monetize
One
them.
of the hardest things that happens to me over and over and over is films approach me that were played at a festival and didn't get good offers or any offers, but it's a great movie, and then 8 months later need someone to market it, to put it in theaters, to qualify it, to do a publicity push for whatever reason, or maybe it should be in theaters, so that's why they're doing it. It is so hard to build that momentum and to build that audience after the fact,
Right.
8 months later. It is so hard, and that's one of the reasons I love crowdfunding. It feels like I'm putting all this energy in and I can watch it like work,
Right.
you know?
And can I ask you, because it sounds like you have to have a certain amount of predictors in terms of, and I know that you're very selective in the films that you choose to take on.
Yeah.
So have you ever encountered a film that you were putting all this effort into and putting all the crowdfunding, marketing together, but saw it was going off the rails? It wasn't going to go to Sundance.
Yeah.
It wasn't getting a theatrical. Can you turn a corner? Do you find that there's always something you can find to market? Like I loved your John Cheadle, that example of just trying to figure out.
It's about thinking about success and how do you gauge it. Like we have a 100% success rate with the films that we've crowdfunded, and that's because we're very picky. Not all of those films were then produced and premiered at a major festival. In fact, one of them, the first one we ever did, still hasn't premiered at any festival. So there's no, it's working on films that you don't exist yet.
Yeah.
In some cases, so how do you know? But we try, a lot of it comes down to what the film is about, who the collaborators are, what partners we think we can get on board, and our bandwidth at a given moment when you guys need to launch.
Well, I know we want to turn it over to questions shortly, but I just wonder if quickly I could ask each of you, can you give a quick example of a project or a film that either was a total success and surprised you and saw some insight into some great marketing that they did, or opposite, was there a complete disaster that just went off the rails?
Who should start?
You can start, Sarah. You have one ready to go.
I mean, someone came to us a couple years ago with a documentary about James the Amazing Randy, a magician, and we did it.
I just saw this movie.
Yeah,
It's a wonderful movie.
And I was like, who? I had no idea who that guy was. And I was like, who's gonna care? I just didn't, I wasn't the target audience at all. But that campaign, the goal was 140,000. It raised almost $250,000 on Kickstarter. And that was a lesson in, if your audience lives on the internet, especially Reddit, you have a good chance of hitting and exceeding your goal.
Go. Write that one
Lesson
down.
one.
And An Honest Liar is an incredible movie. I
Tribeca.
had an ugly cry over it in Bay City last weekend.
Do you have an example?
I do. There was a feature-length, noir thriller called If There's a Hell Below that's just completed shooting. And they're one of the few campaigns I've ever seen. So I don't know if you guys know this about crowdfunding campaigns. They have a big first week, and then there's this terrible doldrums in the middle, and then there's a giant last week. Even the professionals see this. This campaign did this. It was amazing to watch.
And what was the
So
engagement?
each week they had something different, but their third week was my favorite. Their third week they launched the Funder Games. And the Funder Games, and it was literally like a week after the Catching Fire, the second Hunger Games movie came out.
Right, okay.
They knew exactly where their three major audiences were: Madison, Wisconsin, Washington, D.C., and Portland, Oregon. And they pitted the three cities against one another. Whoever raised the most money would pull the premiere. They would premiere the film in that
That's
city.
a good idea.
And it was fabulously successful, and also really funny. And I will say the one, it's a failure technique that I have seen consistently. So imagine that I'm a pitch video right now. Hi, my name is Emily Bess, and I am making a terrifying thriller called The Scary Movie. Very consistently, you see the opening of a pitch video have nothing to do with the genre or the feeling of the video, and so all I will say about that.
I've seen a lot of campaigns.
The successful ones, the first 15 seconds is in the style of the movie that they're planning to make.
Great, thank you. Jay, do you have an example besides Wolf Cop?
Well, Wolf Cop is using all those
Yeah.
techniques.
Yeah.
I can tell you
But
about.
curiously, on CineCoup, because Wolf Cop obviously really was far and above like the real success with the social media. Were there other ones that sort of came along that kind of surprised you in the funnel?
Well, of course, there's a lot of surprises, but you know, like I said, it's like when you look at Wolf Cop, those guys treat it like a full-time job. They use the opportunity. You know, they had fan art coming from South Africa. They had blogs being written in Japan. Like,
Yeah.
to give you an idea on the metrics, like when we greenlit Wolf Cop from the time we announced it at Banff. Within a year, it was in theaters. It's already been sold into 12 countries. It's played 15 festivals. We've sold the book rights, the novel rights, or the novel soundtrack.
That's amazing.
It's already made its money back. The risk
And
equity we
everyone's
had in the
dressing up like
picture.
Wolf Cop for Halloween.
And we've already greenlit the sequel, and there's even a third one that some guys in Joburg want to make, where they want to remake it. So to me, that's success. And my model's very different. Like, we're a launch pad. We're not a destination for, you know, this isn't like a remedial film program. It's not a film school. This is hardcore accelerator. It's based on like the Y Combinator idea out of Silicon Valley. Like, what I tell filmmakers about us is, don't bring me your dream project. Bring me a movie we can make right now that can get your career started. Like, and I'm very much a big fan of Roger Corman and stuff like that. So yes, high concept genre films have this kind of fanboy, fangirl thing that don't just buy the ticket, but they buy the t-shirt and they buy the graphic novel and they write a blog about you and they tell all their friends. And you know, there's the golden era of the 70s. When you look at a lot of the great filmmakers, a lot of them started making this first movie. It's the place they learned. And that's really what we created this platform to do, was to get these filmmakers to market really quick and put some jingle in their jeans at the same time. So.
Okay.
So for me, the campaign I was impressed by was life itself, but I want to use the opportunity to actually talk about two films that did Kickstarter campaigns that we're distributing, and one is playing here, Advanced Style. And the reason why I want to mention it is because there are thousands and thousands of campaigns for films on all the platforms every month. And a few of them go to Sundance or go to theatrical. There's a lot that get made that don't have that. And what I love about Advanced Style and Mudbloods, the second movie, was that these were movies that they just wanted to make, and they knew that people would love and dig that they made them. Advanced Style is gonna do fantastic in the commercial marketplace. And it wasn't done to get to the commercial marketplace. The filmmakers are humble, they're lovely, they're thankful in everything that they have, and they used their ideas and their creativity to do it. Mudbloods is a movie about collegiate Quidditch, a documentary about a fictional sport that's now being played on college campuses everywhere. They were gonna put the movie up on YouTube until a guy convinced them, finish the movie. Let's get some good sound. We just sold it to Netflix internationally, and it's a huge deal. If it wasn't for crowdfunding, they would never have finished the movie.
Yeah.
And so my thing is, use crowdfunding for your passion projects. Use it for your side projects. If you want to make a movie that Magnolia is going to buy, or IFC, or Sony Classics, go do it traditionally.
Yeah.
Do the movie that nobody tells you to do, and that's the one that's going to benefit the most. Your fan base will grow. You'll have fun doing it, and you'll learn a lot, and you'll be able to make a cool movie, as opposed to saying, I need a shortcut to figure out how to make
The
some
only
money.
counterpoint to that is Spike Lee's Kickstarter campaign.
Well, that was the other thing I wanted to
Well, no,
say.
Spike Lee's. Did you see the
This is his
movie?
passion
I
project.
disagree with it. I think you could say that about Veronica Mars, because I think that was a scam. You know, that was going to be made no matter what was going to happen, and they had a fan base, and they just didn't have to spend the money.
Yeah.
I think Spike wanted to make a movie that was bizarre, and his movie that he didn't want to have to worry about somebody financing it.
Yeah.
So I actually think how the campaign went, I don't know, I'm not familiar with that, but the idea of him making the movie, I actually think that Kickstarter was perfect for him. And so I think big filmmakers can use it if they just want to do freaky stuff that they don't want to have to worry about getting permission from the traditional funding sources.
Right. And you probably have a lot of examples.
No, I'll make really two quick ones. So one, going back to passion. So there were a team, not an organized team, but a bunch of friends who were traditional hand-drawn animators for Disney. And then Disney said, we're not going to make hand-drawn animation anymore. And so they fired them all. And so they had to take other jobs at other animation companies, and they had to move into digital animation and what we see today on TV and in movies. But the director of this particular film called Hullabaloo said, screw it, I love hand-drawn animation, I want to do that again. And so he got together with a bunch of highly trained professionals and with resumes that would just astound you. I think James worked on The Lion King and in a lot of other prominent Disney films. And so he came to Indiegogo to fund one short film for his series Hullabaloo. It's a steampunk series with a female protagonist. The visuals are amazing, and the goal is $80,000. They blew through that goal, I think, within 3
Isn't
days.
it like your top 3?
And the last day is today.
Yeah, it's amazing. Actually, I watched the campaign. It's
And
unbelievable.
they've raised, probably by end of day today, $450,000.
That's so amazing.
They're doing, I think there's now not just one short, I think it's a series of 5. And I hope that the success of that campaign will inspire other animators to go off and do the same thing, or that traditional financiers will come back and say, well, there is a fan base for this.
Right.
Over 10,000.
And perfect example of a passion project.
Yeah, over
That's great.
10,000 people have funded that project.
Wow.
And one other really quick one is, because I feel like this is really unique. So I got an email from Todd Brown at Twitch Film. He said, look, I've got a filmmaker you need to meet. She's thinking of doing a crowdfunding campaign. Thing is, she lives in Lao. And she's got a horror film. She's the only female director in Lao. She's the only genre film director in Lao. Her name is Maddie Doe. She had done a short film that premiered at Fantastic Fest a couple of years ago. And so her new film is called Dearest Sister. And she wanted to raise $40,000 for the film, which was the entirety of her budget, being that she shot it in Lao. And during her campaign, there was a military coup in nearby Thailand, which is how they actually get their internet in Lao. So her internet went down during the campaign, but she still raised over $40,000 for the campaign. But going back to her pitch video, Maddie is a character in and of herself. And so the entire pitch video is telling us why she wants to make this film, and it's because she wants to use blood. She wants to use the funding to buy blood and just spread it all over and be insane and just be gory. And she's this really petite little Asian girl, and she's just so fun and so dynamic in the pitch that you go, here's money, go buy her blood.
Yeah.
And so
Has she made the film?
she's making it now. Yeah.
That's so great. Okay, I'm sorry I left it go a little, so we've got time for a couple questions. Phil?
Yeah, it's Philip Chua from Agentic. I really appreciate hearing about the crowdfunding, but that is one part of marketing engagement in a connected world. And I'm really kind of curious if you could talk a little bit more. I really appreciate hearing some of the tips, Jay, you mentioned, like concentrating work on a couple of cinemas, distribution and marketing in a different way. And specifically, I'd also be really curious, like I feel like we're sort of moving into almost like a post-email world with a lot of the one-to-one peer-oriented apps and things like that. And if you've got any tips on that. But first and foremost, what are some other ideas of connecting up with your audience that don't involve crowdfunding?
Well, I'm a big fan of experiential stuff. We throw a lot of parties. A lot of people look at CineCoup like we're technology guys. Yes, there's a fair piece of us as technology. There's another big part of us that are entertainment, marketing. And what we've essentially created is a studio. We're a very creative studio that is always focused on building as much audience equity and value into our IP as we can. I can't stress enough how much the human touch can do to create great evangelists for you. Like instead of going print, radio, and television when we went to Canadian theaters, we went to fan expos. We set up a booth. We brought the actor out. We turned him into Wolf Cop. We took pictures with him. We put him on breakfast television. We threw him out of airplanes. We did stuff that involves the real world. You've got to get outside of your You got to get out from behind the camera. You got to be a fucking rock star
Yeah.
if you're going to go out there and do it. And you got to love your audience.
Yeah.
Like,
But
at the
not
end of
every
the day.
film has a wolf cop or is wolf cop, and I traditionally work in marketing for social issue films, and so you can't be that experimental in that space, but you have to do your due diligence and connect with those audiences and do what they want to do. Not every social issue documentary is a party film, right? Let's face it. But there are fundraising events that are unique to the experience of that organization. You can invite them to participate in Q&As at your specific screenings. You can think about where that audience lives and be most affected by that film. So just
Yeah,
usual
just
And
a-
Marc from Bond. Oh, sorry, I just wanted to give him the.
Just to underscore 100%, we were known as really a social media kind of innovative marketer when we did films like Actually Through the Gift Shop and Senna, but that was only to get people to do things offline. So we were using social media to create passion and interest and all of this stuff, but at the end of the day, it was about converting that to getting people to go to a bar together, to get them to go and do events. And the non-traditional experiential events is exactly where it's at. I mean, in the markets that most people want to get the media in, to four-wall a theater is more expensive than the total revenue of what you can make if you sell out the shows in the theater, because they're very smart about the need for those theaters. So think alternative. When everybody's going left, go right, and you will be successful because it'll stand out. It'll be creative and cool, and don't try to chase what everybody else is doing, because it leads to commodity. It leads to you not being a creative marketer. It leads to you just chasing what everybody else is doing.
I have
Create space, create environments, and
I have a personal story about this.
Let's be quick because I want to get a couple more questions.
So Seed&Spark is a small company. We've raised an absolute fraction of some of the other competitors in our space. And so we have to get to break even. We have to make a business model that will actually pay our investors back. We have to do it on the skin of our own backs. And we're teaching this class about all these creative ways filmmakers can build audiences. And one of the things we've been teaching is to go out there in the community and meet them. So we scheduled a 35-city, 60-day tour of the country. And we are literally going out into the community and shaking their hands and meeting them and asking them, what do you need from a crowdfunding platform? What do you need from a distributor? What are ways to reach your audiences that we haven't thought of? How can we help you? So we figured out what we have to offer, and then we decided to invest the resources in going out and meeting all the people to whom we have to offer it. And you can do that with regional festivals, you can do it with screenings, you can use Tug. There's tons of ways that you can do that, but you have to get in front of people.
Okay, another question at the back there.
Hi. In Canada, we have a really close-knit community that really strives to help support filmmakers for their releases. We've got Academy.net and Eye on Canada, First Weekend Club. We sort of band together with the use of a few different hashtags to just really be pushing out that larger support. And it really works. It reaches tens and tens of thousands of people. I'm just wondering if you could speak to some of those models that exist globally in the States, where people are really together, united to support fantastic indie film.
Isn't that crowdfunding?
Sort of,
And I
but
think
at the
you
same
mentioned-
time, this
Emily
is...
mentioned Tug, which is a really great, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but there's a lot of tools like that bring people out to theaters, that make it an event, and that's what I think Film Presence
So
is doing.
one, afterwards, please come find me because I'd like to learn about those hashtags. And two, I think you're finding filmmakers are starting to do that in the States anyway, where we don't have wonderful things like this. We do a Twitter chat twice monthly that's #FilmCurious, and that has grown a very large following that people are starting to use, which is super cool. Please join us every other Tuesday. But I think filmmakers are starting to figure out how to use their own hashtags from the very beginning of their process all the way through production, getting everyone on set engaged in the conversation around those hashtags and actually making their own films a hashtag that people are excited to follow. And that is, but it's not sort of global scale, it's actually more micro. It's a way to organize your audience for your stuff. on beyond sometimes just a single film. It might be the hashtag that sort of represents your brand as a storyteller.
Fandor.
Yeah. I mean,
You have
that's a
time for one more
distribution
question?
platform.
One more question? Okay, sorry. Where, do we have someone with the mic? Any questions? No? No? We've said it all? You all can go out and make your most successful marketing and audience engagement? Yes?
Jay, you were saying.
Please wait for the mic. Thank you.
Okay, just so we can all hear.
Sorry, Jay. You were saying before there was 3 things you do: reducing discovery cost, and then PA. What was the second one you said that you did?
Oh, well, no, it's more the philosophy around why we started our company, and we are a private company. So our ambition when we started CineCoup was we realized we lived in a time where technology was democratized, is in fact a commodity. You know, it used to be when I shot my short films, I have to spend $5,000 just on the bloody celluloid to develop it. Well, now, you know, every computer, you got nonlinear editing, you got HD cameras sitting around the house. So the differentiator becomes talent and marketing, and the strength of the idea naturally. But we believe that, you know, outside of the places where normal people look, if we could virtualize a studio, we could find talent where no one was looking. We could de-risk new crazy ideas. Ideas that traditionally, like Wolf Cop, we were their last resort. We weren't their first option. They had been turned down by literally fucking everybody possible. Like, what is this stupid idea? But they knew that there was more people just like them that would really get behind this idea. And ours was just, again, we tried to create the lowest barrier to entry possible. You just had to be over 18. In our case, you had to be Canadian because we were testing it. And you had to have a team of 3, and you had to have initially a 90-second trailer. That was all you needed to come in through our doors into the first cohort. So the third thing was, if you did all these missions to package and market and build audience and use the fact that we connected you with, you know, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Reddit, Tumblr, those were all in there, and all the best practices were already built into that page you were creating. Because essentially there's a lot of this going on right now. There's a lot of people doing faux trailers for this stuff, but everybody was doing it as little islands all over the place. Everybody was reinventing the wheel. And we said, what if we could create an island so as these people were bringing their friends and family and then building their seed round of like audience in terms of audience equity and then their Series A and all that, that they all shared in that. And that's why again, reducing discovery costs by creating this aggregated audience and gamifying it so the audience was forced to go around and discover new things and gain influence within an ecosystem. And by doing this, we're pretty sophisticated when it comes to using either off-the-shelf analytics tools or rolling our own. Like at our core, you know, we're almost 15, but we roll like a pretty hardcore back-end crew that knows how to, you know, we know how to scale or that piece of it. And it's all around just the idea of how do we build as much audience as possible and then learn how to deploy them and move them around things. And because at the end of the day, the audience is the only thing that matters. That's where all of the fucking money is. That's like if you were robbing banks, people go to banks because that's where the money is.
Okay, well, we got to cut it off. I'm afraid. I'm sorry. Yeah, these guys will hopefully be around.
Well, we just so
It's coming up in
yeah,
December.
So we're going to
announce it.
Yeah, so you know, we're going to announce it in. We were actually going to do it this fall, but then this opportunity with CBC and Just for Laughs came around. So we're going to be actually unveiling all the Comedy Coup cohort, and it's insane. But please be. I'm not going to say it exactly. But it will be this winter. We'll be announcing one in Canada, and right now I've been spending a lot of time in the U.S. because we're looking to move down there.
Okay, great. Well,
Great,
I
wonderful.
want to extend a huge thank you to our panelists. Great conversation, you guys. Obviously, lots to say.
Thank you. Thank you so much for an amazing panel.